That name has a familiar ring to me. Are you? Is there?
Over here.
It has to be Blinken.
Yeah, I've got to have that red light going. Okay, thank you for participating in the Oral History Project, Mr. Bulkley. I'd like to ask you some questions, and I think the library may have sent you some of these questions. Could we start off by having you talk about where you grew up and some of your earliest memories of growing up?
Well, I was born right out here, 8 miles southeast of Dixon, and I was born in 1906, and there were no paved roads in those days. The country was all pretty well fenced, like it is. Well, they've taken out a lot of the fences, but there's horse and buggies, and no tractors. Everybody, all the farmers had mule teams, and they did all the plowing and harrowing and harvesting with horses and mules. And there was no cars. My dad bought his first car in 1912. I was just 6, and it's the first. Of course, when the first rain came, we put that in the shed and left it all winter until it dried off in the spring. You know, but that's the way it was in those days.
Yeah. Do you remember what kind of car that was?
A Rio.
A Rio. And who made that car?
Well,
Was that
it was made by Oldsmobile.
Okay.
And Oldsmobile's son, somehow or other, they got into difficulty, and he split off from the old man. And Rio was his initials, R.E. Olds.
Oh, okay.
And that was a peculiar car too. My mother was not very strong, and they didn't have self-starters in those days, and you had to crank them. And it had a deal in the front with a ratchet, and a cable came around, and she could pull with her hand like this, and it had to be in pretty good shape because it was just, you can't whirl it. You just the ignition everything had to be working, but they used it for quite a long time. We had that.
Interesting. And so you only drove it then during the summer, or not during the winter?
The roads were almost impassable. There, of course, as time went on, they hauled gravel. And all the gravel was hauled by teams in those days too. There's no trucks like it is now, and so it was. Let me see. I guess it was 1924 before there was gravel down to our house. Tremont Road, coming out from Tremont, was graveled, and Hackman Road from Dixon going out east was graveled down as far as Bulkley Road. But there were ruts like that, and you couldn't go down there, and it wasn't even graded; it was just flat. But they'd take the cream to town and take the eggs to town, and like you come into Dixon, back in there was places to tie horses, and there's 2 or 3 troughs, horse water troughs around town, and that's the way it was, of course. And there's a big livery stable there. I remember that, and there's a corral by the livery stable where they'd leave mules. They'd sell mules. There's mule buyers there. That was quite a business. They used 8 animal teams, but generally the wheelers, that's the 2 closest to the load wheeler, were mares, and they used those for raising mules. And they'd keep each year they'd have a new mule, and they'd have young mules around, and they'd always have mules to sell. So that's the way it was.
And where was your house where you grew up?
Well, it was on what they call Bulkley Road now, about 8 miles from. It'd be south, a little bit east, and a little bit north.
Okay, and that was named after.
The Bulkley Road was named after my grandfather, I guess.
After your grandfather. Could you talk a little bit about your grandfather?
Well, he was born in 1830, and born in New York, and he came west during the gold rush days, and tells about shooting Indians on the way out, and He went to Virginia City, and he met my grandmother there, and they got married in Carson City. And my oldest aunt was born there, and that was in about 1868. And 1869 he came into California. My dad was born out the ranch in 1870. So, and that was the same ranch I was born on. My dad they got married my mother was a San Francisco girl, and they got married in 1905. I was born in 1906, and been here ever since.
Yeah. So your grandfather, once he got here, did he become a farmer?
Farmer in stock.
Farmer, so.
He was more of a stockman, awful good horseman, but he raised cattle, and then they had a dairy one time. Of course, he had various pieces of property. He had some property on the way to Rio Vista. Do you know where Rio Vista Junction is?
Yes.
Well, just from Rio Vista Junction, a little bit southeast, after you make the turn going south again, off that Dixon Road, he had a section on each side of the road there. And sometime during the early days, they run a dairy there, milked the hen and churned the butter and put it in firkins and took it into Rio Vista and sold it.
And how do you know about for how long they did that? Operated the dairy there?
Oh, I guess I imagine for 4 or 5 years. I have no idea really.
Okay. Could you describe your grandparents and your parents a little bit for us?
My grandmother, from the time I remember her, that's my father's mother.
Okay.
She was a little woman, and she was on crutches. And I remember after they moved into Vacaville later in the years, and they had chickens along the railroad there where they lived. And in the wintertime when the chickens quit laying, she'd go out there and try to hit them with her crutch because they weren't laying eggs.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a man about 5'8", rugged, big, heavy set man, and loved to wrestle and scrap and those kind of guys. He was only he died in 1912, so he was 82 years old. Is that right?
When was he born again?
1830.
Yes, that'd be 82.
Yeah.
And he originally came out with the gold rush?
Yeah, came out for the gold rush. And he went into Virginia City, but he didn't make any money. He was unsuccessful as a miner. But he had stock, and he went to freighting. And he'd haul stuff from Virginia City to Carson City. And that was what he did. We often thought there should be some traces of the old man Bulkley there in Virginia City, and not too much in Carson City, but my brother and I both looked and couldn't find it. You can't tell he'd ever been there.
But he did decide to stay when he came out.
Oh yeah, he stayed,
Yeah,
and then he came from there. And then he heard that over the mountains on the other side there was a valley in there. He said where you could farm and work your stock, and so he came over there and discovered it, and then he finally took up the ranch
I see.
and he stayed there till his boys was big enough to run the ranch.
Right.
He retired to Vacaville.
And you had at least one brother, and did you have
One brother.
One brother?
My one brother. He passed away about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I guess.
And what was your brother's name?
Horace Ralph Willard is named after his father.
Yeah.
My father's name was Horace Ralph. My grandfather's name was Robert Bruce.
Robert Bruce.
My grandfather's name was Barbara. And that's kind of coincidence. Her name was Barbara, and his name was Robert. And my son's name is Robert, and he married a Barbara.
Yeah, that is a coincidence. And then your father grew up and also worked on the ranch?
Oh yes, he ran ranch. He quit on the ranch when we took over, my brother and I. And my brother kind of quit. He went into the real estate business, and he passed away. And I have part of the old ranch, and then I added to it, and so we've been out there and putting up with the kind of elements we haven't put up with this year. It's
Right.
rough.
Right. I'd like to come back to the ranch, but could you talk a little bit about the school you went to growing up here? in
Yes.
Dixon?
There was a little school over there on Tremont Road. It was, they called it the Solana Joint School, and it was joined with the old Franklin School District. It was further east out in Neola County, but there was not enough people out there to keep it going, so they joined with that school. And that there was a school there when my daddy went to school there. So it's been there a long time. Of course, it's all gone now. But it was just a one-room schoolhouse, and one teacher took care of it all. And I had the Maxwell girls for teachers, and then I had another neighbor's daughter was Grace Canupi was a teacher, and then Leon Parrish was the last teacher I had. Her family lived here in Dixon.
Mm-hmm.
They're all local people, local teachers. And then I came to high school in 1924. The Dixon High School was only about 90 pupils in all the classes. Our class had about 24 in it. And we had some pretty good teams. We had good teachers. And the schoolhouse here we have here now is the school. When I went to school, it was fairly new. The first school was torn down, and then they had something happened up top, and then they had to rebuild the school. But that school's been torn down now. See, there's another new school.
Right.
See, they've got all kinds of money in this country to buy new schoolhouses.
Did you say that there were some good sports teams at the high school? Were there
Sports?
Yeah.
Oh yes, we had all the teams. We had baseball and basketball. No football in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And I played baseball and basketball and tennis.
Mm-hmm.
And track. We had a good track team. I've got some medals somewhere from track. I ran the half a mile and the broad jump.
Did you? And you competed in track meets?
West was different, Vacaville and Fairfield and Winters and Rio Vista. We had, it was the, what's it, SCAL, Solana County Athletic, SCA, I guess that's Solana County Athletic League, I guess they called it.
Okay.
And then,
So you were, I guess, you went to high school in 1924.
I went to, in 1920, I graduated in 24.
Okay. What were your perceptions of World War I? Did you know? Did you have?
Oh
any
yeah,
relatives
oh
or-
yes, we had newspaper, no radios in those days yet,
Right.
but it was quite a thing. And we had some neighbors who had her mother, the wife's name had been Ostermühl, which was a German name, and her mother was very German. I can remember whenever the Germans was making victories, where she was tickled to death, you know. But when they were getting beat, well, she didn't believe it, you know. It was one of those things, you know. But she was a good old soul.
And what was her name again?
We call her Grandma Ostermühl.
Okay. Did you have any relatives or friends who participated in the war, who fought in the war? From
The
Dixon?
neighbors, we had Lee Atkinson, and he got crippled in the war, got shot, but all there was quite a few neighbors, the Clarence Freeze and the Misfeld boys, and of course they were all older, and of course I was just 1960, that was 1912, it started 1912, I was 6, 7 years old, you see.
Right.
Barely old enough to read a paper and see the pictures.
Right.
But yes, it really left an imprint on me.
And then after you finished high school, what did you do next? Did you go to work on the ranch?
I went out to the ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had 2/4 sections out there, and we worked in the ranch, and he started buying land because he had somebody help. And the bad part about it is that what we paid for the land in those days, when he passed away, it cost us almost enough to buy it again with taxes, you know. There was something don't want that to happen. But
Right.
then after he passed away, my brother and I each took part of the ranch, and my brother finally left the ranch. I bought part of his stuff, and he went in the real estate business. But I stayed at the ranch and increased my holdings. I bought the old Tim Ranch, which is an old ranch out there that's been there had a home on it that was built in 1884, and my granddaughter's living in it now.
And where is that located? The Tim Ranch?
It's on Bulkley Road,
It's on Bulkley.
right, just off of Hackman.
Okay. Do you recall when electricity service came to Dixon? Do you remember about? Was that did Dixon have electricity by the time you were in high school?
We had. By the time we had electricity out the ranch, let's see. We had coal oil lamps, and then we had a Delco system at the house. You know, a little Delco with battery. It's a little generator that charged batteries, and we had lights around the house. And in 1924, it was right after 1924. We had a pump engine. It was pumping water. It was an old Fairbanks Morse engine, and run a belt down to a pit and run a pump.
Mm-hmm.
And I was putting dressing on that pump one morning, and my arm caught and I broke my arm.
Really?
So my dad did away with that. And the electricity was coming then, and he had electricity put in then. That was 1924. Up to that time, we had electricity at the house. We had a little pressure system with a little motor on it, but that's when we got really electricity out there. And from that time on, it came in pretty fast.
Yeah. Do you remember? Was it who was selling the electricity? Was it PG&E?
PG&E.
It was PG&E.
Yeah, PG&E. See, I can't see what was the guy's name. I can't remember the guy's name. It was here in Dixon. But our juice came mostly out of Davis.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, and still we don't come to Dixon for juice. Of course, and we had Mel Monk was in the office here for a while, so he took over pretty well. But Johnny was from Davis to start with.
When did people use coal very much here?
Use coal?
Yeah, did they use coal before electricity?
Mostly wood.
Mostly wood.
Yeah, and they'd bring wood in by the carload and from up towards Reading and up. There's lots of wood up in there. They'd cut those trees. I remember we'd go in there with a wagon with racks on it and fill up bring for our wood shed. And also my dad was a school trustee, and we'd have to get wood for the school too. We didn't use coal. I think some people did, but we didn't.
But when electricity started coming in 1924, it took off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
A lot of people got it.
Yeah.
You know what?
You had to get the line. They had to bring the line in. You see,
Right.
as soon as the line came in, well, everybody wanted electricity.
Right. How big a town was Dixon in the 1920s?
When I first remember Dixon coming in from the east, it said Dixon unincorporated, which would be less than 1,000. And the streets were gravel roads, gravel streets, a lot of boardwalks, and back of the your stores are here, and then back in here, and the stores on the other street, there was areas in there where you could tie your horses, and there was horse troughs in there and so forth. They started paving the streets. I can remember when I was in high school. That'd be in the early 1920s.
Okay.
And there was a hell of a loo going on because people had to dig up money for their share of the paving. You know, if you owned a property, assessments. But it didn't bother us. We were out of the country.
Yeah. What kind of automobiles were most popular when people started buying cars?
Well, there was a lot of Fords and Chevys. My dad, when I went to high school, my dad bought us a Ford with side curtains. You know, it was just an open Ford. There's all kinds of. There was a few Buicks, and depends on how much money people could spend. I remember that Rio cost my dad $1,385, and he traded spent horses in on it. Can you imagine that?
Really?
He bought it from Percy Hoig and Davis. Hoig was an old family, and Percy Hoig rented a garage there.
Can you spell that name?
Hoig,
Yes.
H-O-A-G.
Okay.
The old man Hoig had a store there in Davis. You see, before my father got married, Davis was his town. He went to Davis because it was a mile closer than Dixon. But my mother had a very good friend. In fact, two friends, Mrs. Fritz and Mrs. Anderson. They're all girls in San Francisco, and they work at Pfister's. That was a place in San Francisco where they made sweaters. And somehow or other, Ernest Anderson met his wife Gertie, and they got married, and she came up here. So then my mother would come up and visit her. My dad better. So he started going to Dixon, then, you see, instead of Davis. And it's always been that way since.
I see.
In those days, of course, Davis was a little bit of a town, you know. It was the University Farm, they called it, University Farm. And I remember, I was about 8 or 10 years old, helped my dad drive a bunch of lambs right into Davis to the stockyard. You know where they were?
I don't know where the stockyards are.
You know anything about Davis at all?
A little bit.
You know where that, right on the railroad there's a kind of a creamery place, or a place where you sell ice cream and stuff.
Okay.
It was just across the road on the other side of there.
Okay.
But that must have been, 1916 probably. I remember he bought me a shotgun for $3
Oh, boy.
in town. Before we came home, we had lunch in town, and that gun kicked, so I was afraid to shoot it. God, it kicked.
Well, when did many people go to Davis instead of Dixon to do shopping?
Pretty everybody south of or north of Tremont Road went to Davis. The Sykes family, they were a little bit south of Tremont Road. They went to Davis. The Eggert family, which were neighbors of ours, they went to Dixon. And all the kids went to Dixon because that's the school district.
Right.
In fact, when I went to school, they bought a car, and I drove it, and I'd pick up Adele Eggert. She was one of the girls who was going to school, and Elsie Stick. The three of us went to school until we graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Kept that old car going.
Yeah.
No, the last year when my brother started school, my dad bought a car, and we had an old Ford. We drove a Ford.
Do you remember which Ford that would have been? Would that have been a
Model T.
Model T. Okay.
Yeah. Had the little coils. Do you remember? Do you remember?
I've seen some pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty good Ford, and it had disc wheels.
Hmm.
And I remember I went up to Lake Tahoe with a bunch of guys, and I took the car.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Lake Tahoe was crude in those days too, you know. And there was a tree right in the road, and the road would go around the trees, you know. And I come around the road, and here was a car right in the road, and I tried to miss it, and I hit the car with the wheel, and it bent the disc wheel.
Oh, really?
I had to come home with that thing, shaking the whole way. We fixed the rest of it, but we couldn't get a disc wheel.
Could you talk a little bit about the town of Dixon during the 1920s? Do you remember, were there particular stores that
Oh yes.
were important?
Schultz's store was a big store. And of course, that's out of existence now. They didn't have a butcher shop in there, but they had everything. You could buy a suit of clothes in there. You could buy thread. You could buy a drill for, you know. And they sold the Waterloo Boy tractors. All that was Schultz's.
What kind of tractors was
Waterloo Boy.
Waterloo
I
Boy?
think that was kind of like the John Deere.
Okay. And that's Schultz's?
Schultz. Oh, Oscar C. Schultz.
Okay.
Oscar. Oh, I don't remember Oscar himself,
Hmm.
but I know his son Herbie, and yeah, you could buy, you know, and I can remember a story they tell about during the war. A guy came in there and he said he wanted to buy 25 cents worth of bacon, and so John Nagel was working in there, and he said, "Oh, come downstairs. I'll show you." He cut a piece and how does that smell? Good. He said that's what you get for 25 cents.
Okay, good. Well, so there was the big general store. Were there other kinds of stores in Dixon that
Well, there was a.
people frequented?
Let me see. Cross there was Steinmiller had his harness shop, and there was a Wells Fargo store there, place, and then of course the first door of the banks taken put all that over. Then around the corner going up the other way was let me see, there was a butcher shop. What was his name? Can't remember his name. And then there was a grocery store, and there were two drugstores. Kirby had one, and Roseberry had the other one. And old Bill Gerlach had an ice cream parlor with booths in it, you know, and a place where you could put in nickels and get music, you know. It was popular for the kids.
Yeah.
And then on the corner was J.D. Johnson. It was hardware, and he sold. My dad bought a harvester from him. And right across the street was Dawson's. Of course, that store that used to be Johnson's is Dawson's now, but it wasn't in those days. It was J.D. Johnson. Across the street was Dawson, and that was a bar, and pool room there was pool tables, rooms upstairs, and right across the street was the Maine. I think they called it the Maine Hotel. It was a nice hotel. I remember that. And then across the street from that was the Oddfellows building, and the Masonic Hall was down. Well, I talked for the First Northern Bank was. Then there was the butcher shop, and I think the Purity came there one time, and right there was our Masonic Hall. And by the way, we've just we've united with Athens.
Just having fun?
My mind's trying to remember stuff. Our lodge was called Silverville Lodge after old Silverville. Do you remember the town that used to be out there?
Right.
Named after that, and
I could give you a little bit of a little drink of wine, Bailey's wine.
I don't care.
Would you have a little?
Oh, sure.
A little bit,
Sure.
right?
It won't affect anything, I don't think. Our Silverville Lodge is just united with Athens Lodge in Davis. Isn't it funny that when I went into the lodge when I was 21, God, it was popular. Everybody wanted to belong to the lodge. We had a chapter of D. Malays in Vacaville. They had in Vacaville because it took the boys from Vacaville and Dixon to make enough for a chapter. Well, I just stayed with that. I went through the chairs, and when I got to be 21, I was 21 in September, and I petitioned Masonic Lodge right away. And the next May, I was raised to third-degree Mason. And on the, by God, this week, I'll be a Mason 70 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Boy, that's great.
I went through the chairs. We had some good old Masons in there. The Royer family. You've heard of the Royer family in Dixon?
I've read of them in some of the material.
Yeah. Yeah, they were quite a family. And there was Otto Royer Otto and Jake were both in school, and I was in school. Otto Royer lives in Sacramento now, and he was I guess he's still a lawyer with Donnie Brand, Seymour and Royer.
Okay, let me just take her in out on that. You were talking about the 1920s. Was there the prohibition restrictions here? Were they,
Oh yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
in history books we read about the Roaring Twenties and prohibition at the same
Yeah,
time.
we had probation, and I can't. That didn't seem to make much difference for my family. We didn't. Nobody was boozers or didn't.
Right.
But of course, we had hired help who had drank quite a lot.
And a lot of people just ignored it.
You talk about Otto Royer now. When I went into high school. No, when I went into high school, Jim Kilkenny was quite a family here. He was president of the student body. And then the next year was Bud Eames. There was an old family, the Eames family. He was president.
Could you spell that name?
Eames, E-A-M-E-S.
Okay.
And then the next year was Otto Royer's year. And the next year was my year. I was president of the student body in 1924.
Oh, really?
And after that was Ernie Van Zandt. The Van Zandt was Kurt Eames. Old Kurt Eames had a store coming down from the First Northern Bank, about 4 stores down. And old Bert Vance worked in the store, but it wasn't Bert Van Zandt I'm going to talk about. It was, my dad used to come in with 5 gallons to get kerosene, for the lamps. And my mother had to keep the lamps filled and lanterns. And so he came in one day and Curdy was busy.
This will break into your
He said, my dad said he wanted some kerosene. He said,
Oh, thank you.
he said, go back and fill your can. You know where it is. So he went back, filled his can. So when he got to burn that stuff at home, it started burning out of the vent holes and everywhere. And my he went back and said, what kind of kerosene was that? He said, where did you get it? He got out of a gasoline drum. And we've been burning gasoline, so we didn't burn the whole place up, But Kurt Eames used to buy grain and stuff too, and he had one of those early automobiles, a little Maxwell. I think it was a two-cylinder, and just a two-seater, no top or anything. You see that going down the road.
Let's drink to a good story.
No.
He didn't invite me to come in, but here I am.
There you are, Mama.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Here's to a good story. Well, here's a letter I got from the library.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah. Great.
Well, what were we talking about?
We're talking about Dixon in the 1920s. How and how Dixon started to grow. When did it start sort of really growing?
Well, it seems like it. When I was in school, I think Dixon was about 4,000. I think it was, but it started going. Well, this was all farmland out here. See, then this was, and went out the other way. I don't know. It seemed like it's kind of a bedroom town too. Of course, Dixon's always had business, and there's always buyers, grain buyers here, and lamb buyers here, and wool buyers here. Davis had never had that. Seemed like, and Dawson's was where they had drinks and everything, you know, and a restaurant in there. That's where the farmers would always meet, a lot of them. And there's always buyers in there buying stuff, you know. They buy your grain, or they come out and look at your cattle, or come out to look at your hogs, or whatever, you know.
Sort of a meeting place for
Yeah,
business?
sure.
Yeah,
There's quite a few deals was consummated there. But you go out west as far as Ammon Street, and in 1924, that was about the edge of town. You know where Ammon Street, where Ammon Street is. That's where.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, that's where Barker lived.
Oh, yes. Oh.
That was
In town then.
Yeah, that was about the edge of town, and it started going out that way, and going out the other way. Mesa Slaughterhouse going out that way. That was the edge of town, and in fact, there was nothing, just slaughterhouse, just nothing on the other side. I remember one time, I was coming home from school with the girls in the car, and my God, Della said, I forgot by something or other, so I had to turn around, and there was a big ditch on the side of the road, and it's wet weather, and I was turning around, I slipped down into that ditch, and you know, Bob Curry come along and pulled me out. But there was nothing there. See, that was the edge of town. So it's going since now. You know how far it goes out there. Where's the edge of town now? Pritner goes out to Vaughan Road. Almost. They're building houses out clear out into there.
Yeah. When the stock market crash came, did it in the beginning of the Great Depression? Was there much of an effect?
Well, I don't know. Prices went down, and
You weren't dealing in the stock market.
I didn't have any stock market, but I'll tell you, wheat now is $130 or $40 a ton, and I guess barley is $125 a ton. And we sold barley for $9 a ton. That's the year 1930. That I went with another guy to the state of Washington and worked in the harvest, and they were selling wheat up there for, well, about $8 and $10 a ton, sacked in sacks too. So that's, of course, everything toned down.
Yeah.
That I look back to that summer I spent there in Washington. People are different. All had gardens, and there was a butcher wagon came around, but that country up there, it's a volcanic ash. Everything was dusty, and you could have everything dusted. You just blow out, and just more dust would come, you know. And where we went in and out with the stock to the horse trough, the ground would get just like, you know, just almost liquid. It would just be so loose. I come out of there with a cough. I was when they were 6 weeks, and that dust was getting to me. It would probably killed me if I'd stayed there. But they're good people. I enjoyed that.
Let's see. Farming, I guess, was always the biggest industry.
Here,
Yeah.
yeah.
A little bit of cattle.
And lots of sheep.
Lots of sheep.
Lots of sheep in this country. I ran 2,000 ewes one time myself. My dad always had lambs. I told you I helped my dad drive lambs to town when I was a little kid. He always had sheep, and we always had cows. We didn't run too many cattle, but we always had cows and milk. Of course, we run cattle now too, but we had about 10 or a dozen cows. We'd milk night and morning, and milk them out in the krill. You could go right up to them and with a stool and sit down and milk them, you know.
And what kind of agriculture is it?
It used to be almost all barley farming, and they'd have 2 crops in 3 years. They'd summer fall because we didn't get too much rain. Not like now, you know. Our normal rainfall is about 16 inches, and lots of years you'd only get 10 or 12. So if you have summer fall, you generally raise a crop. So they'd summer fall, leave that lay and keep it cultivated, and then after summer fall crop, they'd put in what they call winter sowing. They'd plow it and have another crop, and they could have some pretty good crops if we had rain. And then of course, they had everything was fenced. You'd have livestock out there. You'd have some cattle. So we had sheep, and people raise their own stock. You'd have your horses out there, your mares with a few colts and so forth. And it was more primitive than it is now. You know, people took care of things themselves, and you didn't have mechanical stuff. You'd have a blacksmith shop where you could shoe horses, and if you were lucky enough to be a good enough blacksmith, you could make some welds if you knew how. You didn't have electric welding like we have now, and anybody can just that stuff now.
Yeah. How big was your ranch back in the 20s?
In the 20s, my dad started out. We had two quarter sections. He had 320 acres. Then he bought the field across the road, and the field he had. Well, we ended up with about, right now I've got about 2,000 acres.
So you've acquired some land.
Yeah. Well, I bought land. Yeah, well, you know, that's the thing you do.
Right. You still do mostly the barley?
No barley at all. It's all wheat.
All wheat?
Wheat.
When did you switch over?
Well, they had a brand of wheat that they brought in from Mexico. They called Anza, and it yielded great, and it just took over. And they raised as much wheat as you could barley, and it brings more money. And so that's what does it. Whatever brings more money, that does the job. Of course, like my big thing was sheep. I run a lot of sheep and rented a lot of ground, and of course bought land too to run them on. But you had 2 crops. You had your lamb crop and you had your wool crop. And of course, my brother and my dad used to run about 1,000 ewes, and of course it cost money to shear them. So he bought a shearing outfit, taught my brother and I how to shear sheep. So we both could shear sheep. My brother got to be a real good shearer. We both my uncle went on the road shearing sheep, different. And there was 10 shearers in the group, and he'd get where we'd stay some days a week shearing in one place. But it's hard work to start with. Once you get broke in, you like it.
What did people do for entertainment? Was there a movie theater? Or?
Dance every Saturday night. There's always dances, you know, and Out there, the old Tremont Hall used to be out there at Tremont. They built that just for that. Before that, did I tell you about the schoolhouse, the old Franklin School District down there? The schoolhouse was down there, and it was abandoned. It had a good floor in it. So there's about half a dozen families that went down there with their kids and graph-phones and started, and it got so popular,
Used to have
they built
suppers out there.
this Tremont Hall out here, you know, and it was, got to be famous, you know, until it burned down. So I don't know what it burned down from.
I think that'd be good if they had that now for the kids, someplace that they could go dance.
Right.
Well,
Maybe they can get to meet each other, you know, and
when I was in high school, our student body put on the suppers out there. We'd go out there and put on the suppers. 12 o'clock, they'd have supper. They'd dance till 2.
And you said people would bring their gramophones, their record players? Or
Not on Tremont, down Old Skunk. Well, they call it Skunk Island because there's a skunk underneath it. One time, it kind of, you could smell skunk there, and they call
they
it
had live music.
Skunk
didn't
Island. No,
they had somebody to play for the
not
dance.
mostly we had a graphophone down there.
Did you?
Yeah,
Oh, I thought you had
no, down Skunk Island, down Franklin.
somebody to play.
No. Well, once in a while, somebody like old John Taylor would come with his fiddle, but
Yeah.
no, we used a graphophone. And we got that place got so crowded, we figured we had to do something else, so they built this Tremont Hall, which was big enough. But now, it burned down and we don't need it. We voted in it for years, too.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
You did?
Okay.
And it was a meeting place. You go over to the hall and have a meeting, you know. That you ever been down that Tremont Road?
I don't recall that I have been down that road.
If you go down Tremont Road, you'll come to a place where there's a little Christmas tree farm. And that's right where the schoolhouse was, and the hall was right in there too. Right there next to the old Eggert Ranch. It's a big ranch for the old home that's been there for years. And of course, the Eggerts are all gone, and it's the Jones family there now.
Sort of, who were the leading citizens in Dixon during the 20s and 1930s?
Well, there were the Halls and the Mosses and the Rices and Madden, and there was always the Tim. Some of the Tims around. Tim had, and Tim had the big dairy out here. You know, certified dairy, the biggest, I guess, one of the biggest certified dairies in the world. And he shipped in bottles, shipped it to San Francisco. I remember when I was in school, even he'd come by with his rig and boxes and he'd get it on the train.
And that was Tim?
Tim, that was Henry Tim.
Okay.
And then Olin Tim was his son, who was just passed away just a few months ago. But the Tim family still have the ranch. Bob Gill runs it. Rents the whole ranch now. It's all row crop. It used to be alfalfa, you know. You'd come to town and you'd see those guys loading green alfalfa on the wagons, you know, to take up to the cows, you know. Beautiful loads, just square. But now it's all row crop. Like you go along there now, it's all tomatoes. The church is on part of it.
When World War II broke out, was there any effect on Dixon or the people here?
Oh yes, it took a lot of the guys. Of course, see, I was pretty young then too, but Misfeld boys, Freeze, Robin's boys. I don't know, there was 2 or 3 of them killed. But my group, we're still too young for that. But prices went up during the war, grain prices, and some of them even. They figured in those days $20 a ton was pretty good, pretty fair price. You know, it wasn't enough, but that's what they were getting, and it was getting up to $75 and $80 a ton. And old Al Robin, he had a pretty good crop, and he was holding his for $100 a ton, and he sold it for $15. Yeah, the Robin family is a big family here. There were a lot of Robins, and they owned lots of land. The old man came out, and his wife had money with her, I think, and she loaned money. Came from Germany. I don't know where she had brought it anyway. And they owned lots of land, but they had a big family, and the kids all got land, you know, and some of the kids sold their land, and that's how it happened. Clear from Robin Road, Pettick Road here, clear to Robin Road, down about 5 miles, that whole block in there was all Robins. All of it. Of course, Dawson bought a lot of it too. Dawson was a big chicken man out here. His wife was my school teacher when I went to school. And he must have had 10 or 15,000 chickens there, hens, I don't know how many. And he made money in the chicken business. He bought a lot of that Robin land too. But this ground around Dixon is pretty good country, pretty good farm ground. Of course, around Davis is awful good ground too. But you get further east, you get into the water must have stood there years ago because it gets a little bit alkali. We have land out there now that it raises pretty good Lydiana clover for pasture, but it got alkali in it, quite a bit of alkali. And I can remember where salt grass was growing on. Do you remember salt grass?
Salt grass.
And even that salt grass, in the middle of the summer, you go through it and you get your shoes wet. Oh, my dad taught us farming young. We went out of school. Well, in fact, I was 12 years old when I was, you know, he bought it from Johnson, there in Johnsontown. He bought a McCormick Deering harvester, 9-foot cut. It took 12 animals to pull it. Ground drive, no engine on it, just pull it. And I drove it. I drove the team. I was 12 years old. And he sowed the sacks, and we harvested our grain, and sometimes some of the neighbors' grain. And we used that for quite a few years, and then we got a year, something like this. And the grain went down, and we got out there with that harvester, and you couldn't, you had to take so much straw, and you had to go fast enough to keep the cylinder going, that you had a pile of stuff, and you couldn't get it through, it wouldn't go through. So then he bought what they call a tin hole with an auxiliary in front to run this harvester, and you could creep along, and so that then we used one of those for a while. And so now now of course we have self-propelled. You sit up there and don't use the horses, no engine, no nothing.
How many people work on the ranch with you? Do you have other employees, many employees?
We have two steady people. Two Mexican boys have been with us for 20 years, I guess. And sometimes we have to get somebody else, and then we have some custom work done. But we do most of our own work. We have our own harvester and own mowers and own balers, and they're pretty good veterinaries too. We doctor cattle, and well, you know, you could give them the checkbook, they could run the ranch, I guess. They might run it in the hole, but
Yeah, you never know.
They say they know what to do.
Do you remember, again, back in the early days of Dixon, were there doctors who were
Oh yes,
known?
there were 3 doctors in Dixon. There was Dr. Stolley, Dr. Parsons, and Dr. Floreth. 3 of them.
And who, the last one, could you spell that?
Floreth, Floreth,
Okay.
and Stolley was Stolle.
Okay.
Stolley was the guy that fixed my arm when I broke it.
Oh, really?
He just put splints on and sent me to Woodland. And Dr. Parsons, I never went to Dr. Parsons. And we had one veterinary, old Dr. Alameda, and then after that we had Dr. Tim, the dairyman's son's son.
Oh, okay.
And he was quite a guy. I've had him quite a few times. A lot of times we have trouble with cow trying to have a calf. You get the vet out there, and cesarean, he'd open him up, and he'd generally always die. So we have quite a joke about that. But he's got a pretty good practice. But farm animals now, if I have anything, we just take it to the university, put it in the truck and take it over there. And but here, Doc here's got dogs and cats. There's a lot of people take dogs over there, and I guess that keeps him going. But I like the university the best. If you have to have a cesarean, you can have a cesarean. If you have other things, and they use it as a teaching hospital too for the students. And you see, with a cow, if she has trouble calving, too much trouble, you crush a nerve up there. She'll never walk again. She never can get up. And they know that get to the point where they'll just open her up and take the calf out. They know how to do it, and they're sterile and everything. I've had a few times, not too much, but we have a little heifer in the yard there right now that, you see, we buy we have about 100 cow in our herd that we have our own calves from, but we run about 500 animals, feeders, and we buy a lot of them at the sales, or some come in from Nevada. But we buy heifers and steers, and of course you can't help but getting some pregnant heifers once in a while, and you get them out there. They get bred too young, and here you got a little calf like that's going to have a calf, and that's where you have your trouble. We got, like I say, we have one in the yard right now. We're watching like a hawk. If sometimes nothing to it, they have them right away, and sometimes they can't have them, and so you got to help them. And if it's too bad, rather than lose the cow, you better take her to the university and do something about it.
Right. That's a good service to have nearby.
Yeah.
You can do that.
And they take care of that emergency stuff pretty good too. But that's a big place over there now.
Yeah, that's a big place. It sure is. Do you recall any, say, big fires in the Dixon area, or storms that caused problems? Or?
The big fire was I think it was 1904, and before I was born, before my dad was married. It started from the train just the other side of Pewter Creek, and a terrific north wind was blowing, and it jumped the creek. Those mustard stalks, little pieces would blow, and it burnt the Watkins family out altogether, and it burned all the fences. Pretty everything before that was board fences, boards, and burnt the fences clear out past our ranch, out 8 miles east, and there was happened to be as a coincidence, there was a kind of a string of summerflowers fields, for about 2 miles long, and it ran into that and went out. My dad was.
What kind of fields were those?
Summerflower, where they plowed leaves lay over.
Okay.
And my dad said he was working with Andersons over here. They're harvesting pretty close to Dixon here, and he was coming home. He could see the fire coming, and there was one little spot along a fence where someone fell on both sides, but the fire was going down the fence, and he whipped that out. He said if it had gone down there, it got out and opened the ground again, you don't know where it had gone to.
Right.
But they talk about the ranch I bought is the Tim Ranch, and old Hans Tim was harvesting, and that fire was coming, and he never quit harvesting. He kept harvesting the whole time. They talked about that old son of a bitch who would help put out that fire.
Yeah.
But
And what year was that again? Did you say?
that was about 1904.
1904. Okay.
It burnt the whole country. Then Dixon had a fire. I don't know when Dixon's fire was, but burnt the whole block. I can remember that fire too. Don't know what year it was. But that's why there's so much brick. There's so much brick stuff in Dixon. The fire's got it. And Davis was hurt one time too with a bad fire. That north wind, it gets dry. It's dry wind and it blows. God damn it, I can't remember when that fire was. The old hotel was still standing there. I remember that.
What was the name of that hotel? Was it the
Main Hotel.
The Main Hotel. The Main Hotel. I can probably look up that fire and let's see. Are there other interesting? How am I doing? Are there other interesting events or people that you can think of connected with the history of Dixon that we haven't talked about?
Well, all the old timers, there's some story about some of those, but you'd have to get on the story.
Right.
The big families, the Kilkenny family was one of the big families. They were farmers, and Jim Kilkenny was mayor of Dixon for a long time.
Is it K-I-K-K-I-L?
K-E-N-N-Y.
Okay.
And his father was John Kilkenny. Watsy Kilkenny is still alive. He had the Farmers Exchange store in town. There was Peterson family. Peterson's out south of town. They had big ranches out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why my granddad, when he came, instead of trying to get on some of this good land, he wanted to get close to the river because that was where your transportation was. You haul stuff out of the river. He got out there. We got out into heavier ground. Of course, there's ridges come through there that help, but he could have bought some of the best land here for $5,000 a quarter. God.
You never know.
No.
You never know.
Well, it was new too, and he come into a country he didn't know much about.
Right.
Yeah, the big families around Dixon here was the McEwens and the Garnets. They were out towards winters. They had lots of land, big. And even over here, coming in on this side of Dixon, there was Rose Silver. She was related to the Garnets. They had beautiful land, and they had very wealthy people. You see, you go in the lodge and see.
Yeah, is it Garnet? G-A-R-N-E-T-T?
I think so, yeah.
Something like that. Okay.
McEwen was M-C-C-U-N-E.
M-C-C-U-N-E. Okay. And how about your own ranch? How did that evolve over time? You got out of barley and into wheat. And
Well, we about 1912. That's about the time alfalfa started in this country, and they put down wells and irrigate alfalfa. And my grandfather had 3/4 sections there. one for each one of his sons. My dad bought my Uncle Wallace's quarters, so my dad had 2 quarter sections when I first was a little kid, remember. But this, it was all barley, raised barley, and he had some sheep and a few milk cows, and they made a living, you know. And then we got out of school and had free help. Yeah. We worked, and he started buying land, and land hadn't started going up yet. Then you could buy a lot of that land for $50 an acre, and that's $8,000 a quarter. You know, that wasn't too bad. So he bought 3 or 4 quarters around there. Then he started coming. He bought part of the Tim Ranch when the old Tim people died. He bought 2 of those quarters, and that's where my ranch is now. I bought 2 more down there.
What kind of equipment did you use when you started out farming? You talked a little bit about some of the plows.
Well, I drove a little bit a mule team with one line, but not very much. We went to tractors. My dad bought a tractor in 1918. See, I was only 12 years old. See, I was driving that tractor, and we pulled a harvester with that too. Then after that, but then we got different tractors, bigger tractors, and as he got more land, he'd buy different tractors. Then we got Caterpillars. We could overhaul a tractor from the tracks right on up, and he put in a deal where we could have big poles and a big beam across. We had chain blocks, and we could reach down and pull up stuff. And it's crude, you know, not like it is now, you know, in a lot of places, but that's the way we did it. And some of those bearings in those old tractors was long battery bearings like that. And when you get to that point, we'd have to get a mechanic out there to do that. But I'll tell you a story about that. We used to have a lot of windmills, you know, and they had battery bearings in them too. And my dad used to batter them. And when I was in Washington, they had all side hill harvesters. You know, you know what a side hill harvester is?
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, a harvester, the screens have to be level, or the grain all goes to one side.
Okay.
So you can raise the harvester up. And then there's a cogwheel deal with a deal on it. You can raise the whole side of the harvester up to keep it level.
Okay.
Well, that leveling outfit went out, and I was just, see how I was about 21 or 22 years old. I was up there, and he's the temperament. He's a pretty good temperament, but he said, what are we going to do now? Well, I said, my big mouth, I said, why don't you babbit it? Babbit it? You know, can you babbit it? Sure. And then if he didn't take it over to a shop and I babbited that thing, worked. So they had a lot of respect for me after that. But well, just stuff you picked up at home, you know. We used but we had trouble in those hills over there, badger holes. Badgers would come and a wheel hitting it, and bingo, you're tipped over so far. They've tipped over a few harvesters. But oh well. I enjoyed that summer up there.
And what was the year of that again when you were up there?
That was let's see. That was this summer of 1931.
1931, okay. And then, see, we have about 1950s, 60s, you're still working on the ranch?
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, I'm still working on the ranch.
Yeah, still working on the ranch, 1990s.
Yeah. We, I see my dad retired, went to Sacramento. See, when was that? He was born in 1870. Well, in the 30s, he went and left the ranch to my brother and I, and then
And he moved to Sacramento?
he went to live in Sacramento. He lived there till he got pretty old, and then he came back to Dixon, and he lived in Dixon a couple of years, and he passed away. He died in 57. 57? He was 87. Is that right? Am I figuring it right?
Born again,
He was born in
1930?
30? Yeah. Yeah, 57 is right.
Okay.
And my brother, he sold out to me, and just when it was. Well, he lost part of the ranch, I bought the sheep and stuff. He got dabbling in real estate and getting over involved, and you get to the point where I was buying land, I wasn't able to help him anymore. So, but I bought that. See, when I started, the Hyde Ranch is a ranch right by the cemetery. Do you know where the Tremont Cemetery is?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
Well, my dad bought that ranch in, about 1927, I guess. And so nobody lived there for all those years, but I've always wanted to live there. And so when I got married, he took part of the old house, moved it back, and built a little on it, and I had two rooms and a little small, neat little house. And we lived there until after it burned down. And then I came back to ranch. My brother went to town, and I lived in the big old house on Buckley Road. That house was, we talked about the railroad fire. The railroad fire cleaned all the fences out in 1904. My dad bought that house the other side of Sykes Road, and they put it up on wagons and put a harvester team on it, 32 mules, and pulled it across the country and put it right where it sits today, and he built onto a little bit of it. That old house is still there. That was I don't know when the house was really built, probably in the 80s, but that was 1904, I guess, or 1905. Just come right, no fences, you see, just come right across otherwise you couldn't, you'd have to tear down fences and stuff. See, the Sykes family was a big family out there in that Tremont area, the Sykes family and the Eggert family. Foster's was a big family, Foster family. They had the warehouse at Tremont, and they had a big ranch too. They must have over 1,000 acres around there. Good land, real good land. Two foster girls were in school, and I went to grammar school over there. There were three foster boys. Leslie Foster was the oldest one. He was in the 8th grade when I started. And of course he was gone. And I don't know what happened to him. These big families, they go and they're gone. Fosters they went down that way, they went north, and they hit a lot clear to the creek, and they had a lot of orchard back in there. One of the boys, Arthur Foster, and then there was another guy named Palmer back there, had a ranch back in there, raised fruit and trees and stuff. That country is good for trees, fruit. But out in our country, it was when I was in younger days, it was always barley. Once in a while, one of those guys up around Tremont would raise some wheat. The Currys generally always had wheat. The Currys were further towards the freeway, and they went clear down the creek and clear back that way quite a ways. They had a land grant. The old man Curry. Old man Curry, he was a lawyer in San Francisco, but they didn't have any land at all. And that was the Spaniard style, and the Spaniards were happy-go-lucky guys, spending money and quarreling, and they had got him. He was representing him in lawsuits, and of course they never paid him. You know, they just so he just put it down in the book. And one of these days, well, he just took the ranch. See, he debated about taking it. He didn't think, but the wisest thing he ever did. You know, he had no idea the value of it, and so that's where the Curry started. That was old R.S. Curry, and then and he had a family. The Phillips. Phillips was his one of his daughters, and Shirley was one of his daughters, and then he had Bob Curry. Curry was his son, and they're still out there. The Shirleys, there's a Shirley ranch out there, and there's a Phillips ranch that's still in existence. Bob Curry's gone, and his son Robert Curry Jr. is still out there. In good country, beautiful place. Of course, there's a lot of good country out there. Down our way, the ground is heavier, and when you get heavy winters, the water don't get off, and it hurts the grain and spoils it. Lots of times it drowns it out. You get nothing but hay. But years ago, it seemed like this country was kind of must have been sloughs go through here, and from these sloughs out for a ways. They must have overflowed. I mean, I'm talking about maybe hundreds of years ago, and it made the ground better good. And underneath that is alkali or heavy ground. So the Hyde Ranch is a pretty good ranch we have over there. The slough goes right through it. In fact, I filled the slough in one a few years ago when I leveled the ranch, and it's a good ranch. And the home ranch, the ridges are kind of petering out. The figures are ridges and they disappear. So it'd be interesting to know just how the country developed.
Right. Were there any particularly bad storms that would cause the problems for agriculture?
Well, the only storm once in a while you have one of those storms that will blow a barn down, but this time of year, when the grain gets just a little bit riper, those heavy, hard north winds will show the grain. You can have a crop that's making 1.5 tons to the acre and end up with 400 or 500 pounds. It just shells it out. Nothing standing up there but partial heads and little beards, you know. It's bad. That's why for a number of years I windrowed my grain. When it got just about ripe, I just put it in windrows and use a head or pickup and pick it up. And another reason was my son, he was in the National Guard, and just about harvest time they took him away for 2 weeks in the National Guard. So all the time I was windrowing, and when we come back we harvested it. You know, well, that was the Scotch in me, you know.
Yeah.
And we put up our own bins. We had bins out there. We still have the bins. We're not using them so much anymore because it seems like holding your grain doesn't do you so much good anymore. I don't know why, but we don't store too much. Well, but when we grew a lot of corn, and we put it in a dryer. And when you have corn, you dry it and put it in the bins. So it takes quite a little. We got, I think it's 13 to 14 bins out there.
Really? And your son helped also on the ranch?
Oh yes, he came.
Yeah.
He said he's a great hunter. He loves to hunt. His house in town, he's got stuff from everywhere. He's made 2 trips to Africa bringing home stuff.
Oh boy.
But he said that he was a pretty good pitcher. He threw a pretty good ball, but I said, well, if you don't want to go to school, he didn't want to go to college. If you don't want to go to college, I said, I'll make a farmer out of you. So he stayed home. Of course, he's 65 years old now, so he's telling me what to do. But he lives in town too.
In Dixon?
Yeah. Well, when he got married, I bought a duplex for him over there, and then when after a while, he bought his own home over there well, it's on Ammon and Marvin. There's an old doctor. Used to be a doctor's house, and they remodeled it and made a nice home of it. And he's built onto it where he's got a place for all this crap he brings. Now he's going, next Saturday, he's leaving for Alaska, bear hunting.
Oh, boy.
But he loves it, you know. But, I was going to tell you this story. He's a good shot, you know. Just when he was a little kid, I moved out there to that place in 1939, and that's just about the time of the war. And they pulled a trailer in there with a telephone in it. They put a stove in it, and when planes was coming over, it was an observation post. You'd telephone, there's a plane coming, you telephone, there's a plane there, because they was afraid of enemy planes, you know. And so there was this one family, a Stanford family, would come every night about a certain time, and just about before he went to bed, he'd go out and he'd visit. He knew him, and he'd go out and visit with him. And Ernest Anderson could smoke cigarettes, and he'd smoke them down to the ashes, you know. And for Christmas, Bob had got a little pop gun with a cork with a string on it, you know how you.
Right.
And Bob was telling him how good he was with that gun, how shooting. Ernest says, you couldn't hit the ashes off my cigarette. By God, Bob did. He shot the ashes off, you know. But anyway, when he got the real McCoy in the Army, they had a shoot day down there where they bring in a lot of these guys from the regular Army for target practice. And they had hat pads, the rest of them, you know. There's 5,000 of them, and Bob outshot.
Did you?
He got a medal for that. He just a natural good shot. He loves to shoot, and he loves to hunt. Still loves to hunt. And he's had quite a bit of surgery here lately. He had a hole in his heart, and he had that patched up about a couple of years ago. Now he just had prostate surgery, and he healed up. He just talked with the docs. He's healed up. He began to put a little belly on. That's not good, but anyway.
What was the best year for crops? Best, was there 1 or 2 years that really stand out as good years for agriculture?
Well, there's a terrific crop this year. Mm-hmm. If you have spring rains, it makes a big crop. Per any year we have spring rains, but of course now you see, since the advent of irrigation, they irrigate. We all put levees in. If we have to irrigate, we can. And this year we won't have to, but we're going to have good crops anyway. Beautiful crops. They're going to be some 3-ton grain in the country if it don't go down. The rain will put it down. If it does that, that'll hurt it. But we've got grain that'll make 50 sacks the acre. But you see, we're going to row crops. See, we're more tomatoes and more. We've got 500 acres of alfalfa, and a lot of that's getting wet. And there's about 300 acres of tomatoes, 320 acres of tomatoes. And then we have quite a bit of irrigated pasture, where we pasture cattle. That's what I was telling you about. We buy these heifers, and some of them become pregnant, and we keep them for cows if we calf them without dying. But the cattle business is kind of rough right now. Feeders are high. I don't know why they're so high. You have to pay all the way from $80 to $1 a pound for these feeders. Feeders are away from $350 to $550, 600 pounds, and fat cattle are only about 64 cents a pound. And you just can't hardly do it. Just can't hardly do it. But you put the grass fat on it. If heavy feeders will bring about 80 cents. Well, you might be able to do it that way because you get them up to 800 pounds, you sell them as heavy feeders into the feedlot. They'll buy them. And then in the feedlot, it costs about 60 cents a pound to put on a pound of fat. And if you get 65 cents a pound for them, you're making for the amount of days you've had it in. It costs you about $2 a day to feed them. You have to feed them about 120 days, so you got pretty near $240 in them, and they'll gain 3 pounds a day. So during that time, they'll put on, and you can make a little bit, but it's not. It's too close. Then there's always one will die. Something gets wrong with them. But I don't know. The best money I ever made was in the sheep business. Run a lot of sheep, and you have wool. You share the wool. Wool's a good price, and in the spring it's lots of work. For lambing and sheep, in bad weather, you're with them day and night. You have to, the little lambs, they're dead. Bad weather, they'll shiver and go die. You have to say once they get on their feet and suck once, well, by God, they're pretty sturdy. And when I was running 2,000 sheep, you're taking a pretty good chunk of money every year. Of course, then it come income tax. That's a bad thing too.
Another chunk of money. Right.
But we did good with our sheep, and we could. They're not like cattle either. You could run these sheep on wetter ground, and they don't peg it up too bad and ruin it. And that's why we bought some of that land out there too. Of course, we bought it for sheep, and then since the advent of irrigation and all this leveling land, we've leveled it. Now it goes into row crop. What we used to use for sheep feed, we're growing tomatoes on. We don't grow any tomatoes ourselves. We have tenants grow the tomatoes. But there's about 320 acres in tomatoes this year. And of course, if they get them off before it rains, you always got that, But what they do now? They get the ground ready, and they plant the plants. They go out there with a machine and they plant about this high. Plant about every this far. 70,000 plants to 7,000 plants to the acre. And there you got otherwise you put the seed in the ground, and then you have to wait for a rain, or you have to irrigate them up, and then they have to come up, and you have to have them thick enough so you get a stand. Then you have to thin them. This way you don't have to thin them. They're already there, and I think it's taken. A lot of people are doing it, and those plants are taking off. Just like I've got a few out here in the yard that I just plant. You go to the store and get a few plants. You plant. You have some tomatoes out. If you want a tomato, of course the ground's so wet they can't cultivate them.
Sounds like you've had a very interesting career.
Career? Well, yes, I guess it's over. Yeah. It ought to be over. I'll soon be 92.
It's continuing. Yeah.
Well, sometimes if I sit down for quite a while, I wonder if I'm going to walk again. I've had this hip fixed twice, this one once. I had this arm broken and plated. I had this hip fixed, and I was on a horse, and he got to acting up a little bit, and he acted, and he stumbled. He stumbled, and I kept myself. I hurt that hip. I had to go back and have it fixed. It broke the glue in the femur.
Oh, really?
And I had to have it done over again. But all those things telling you, it's not like you got a scar up here and a scar up here and it's been cut open. just like an old dog has been fighting. He's all cut up, bit up. Yeah, of course. Now my eyes are going. I've had cataracts. I've had glasses for a long time. I wore contacts, but one time we had a ranch rented up in Winters, and I was looking for some cattle, and we're riding down the creek, and that branch hit my face and knocked my hat off and out one of my contacts. And I got off the horse and looked for it in the gravel. I couldn't find it. This eye was not very good, but so I had to manage to get back to my pickup, and I got turned around and headed home. And I said, well, I'll make it all right. And I damn near run a guy off the road. I could, you know. But, so I had to get the contacts. They're nice, you know, but if they fall out, you're blind.
Right.
And so now I'm having trouble with getting a driver's license. The last driver's license I got just for a year. Well, they see how old you are, the first thing. And then you don't read those things up on the wall just quite good enough, you know. And then they take you out driving, and you got to be awful careful, you know, more careful than you ordinarily ought to be. But well, I'd like to have it for a year. If they take my driver's license away, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. Build a shed in his house and get a horse, I guess. Well, what's a man going to do? It's been out in the country all his life, you know. See, when I first got married, I lost my wife about 13 years ago, and I know Lillian since for years, and so we got married, and I was still out in the ranches, that big house all by myself, and so I rented the house out. Came in. She had a house over in West B Street. And I lived there for a few years, and I always wanted my own house. So we came here, and it's been about 2 years since we moved in here. It was almost new.
Yes, nice.
Mickey Leach built it. Well, this is no good. I had a lady come in here about 2 months ago, and she didn't see that. She fell. My niece's mother-in-law, but she's getting along all right. She didn't break anything, but. And I tell you, one time I was down there where that big feedlot is going on the freeway. What the hell? Yeah. And after we'd been there for a while, I was feeding cattle down there, and went and had dinner. And coming from the dining room, there's a long hall, all carpeted, and there's a step like this, another step. I didn't see that goddamn step. Bang! I went. Well, got up. Didn't break anything, luckily, but I have that trouble. See, I don't like those steps. Of course, I know that's there now. If I fall with that, it ought to be my own fault. But you, like a friend here I have in town, he says these golden years are for the birds. That's right. You know, you think you can do things, but you can't do them anymore.
Seems like you're doing very well.
I'm getting around.
Yeah.
But I think if I don't get out the ranch and see what's going on, well, they can't get along without me. They get along without me fine. I know that too, you know. But of course, I do print all the bookwork and
Don't you guys know what time it is?
pay the bills. Was it supper time yet?
You're going to get tired of each other.
No, we're having a good time. It's very interesting.
Are you? That's good. Well, I come in to spoil it, huh? Will I spoil it if I come in?
This is my boss.
Yeah.
Her name is the same name as my mother's name, Lillian. My mother.
Just about through?
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
so.
I think we probably are.
My mother was Swedish,
Mhm.
and her mother and father both came from the old country.
Really?
The old country name was Kellgren,
Hmm.
and my grandfather said that meant shell grain in English, and he changed the name to shell grain.
How would you spell that?
Kellgren, Kjelgren,
Oh, okay.
and then he changed it to shell grain, so it's all been shell grain.
Okay.
But my grandmother's name was Blythe. They were English, and during the time when the English put taxes so heavy on, I don't know what it was in England, they moved to Sweden, and so she goes with an English name to Sweden, but she didn't marry my grandfather till she met him over here.
I see.
He was a steam engineer, and she met him in Chicago. The family came out of Chicago.
Interesting.
And I don't know when they came to San Francisco, but it was pretty early. I should look that up, shouldn't I?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. There might be a little genealogical sheet in that letter that the library sent you.
Yeah.
Oh, there goes the. Let me just turn this tape quickly, and then we'll end this interview. So did they send you another letter, or just the only one?
I think that's the only one.
Okay. Just before we end the interview, are there any other interesting things that you can recall about this area that we haven't talked about?
Well, Dan McKinnon got shot here, you know.
I don't know anything about that.
he was a constable, and he was on the train, and he went to get him, and he shot and killed old Dan McKinnon. That's about the.
How did that happen? What was that?
Oh God.
They even shot back in those days.
That was back in. I was still out on the ranch. That must have been back in the teens, I guess. Back in the teens. Then we got Clay Groves, was constable for years and years and years.
Yeah.
You remember Clay Groves, don't you?
I
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now they don't have a constable anymore. It's city police, and I guess they're all in cars all the time, aren't they? There's nobody walks the streets anymore.
I don't know.
There used to be a night watchman too. Old, what was his name? He was a hell of a fighter anyway. If you ever get into a fight with him, he'd back up into a corner, back against the wall somewhere so nobody could get behind him. He could whip wildcats. He was good. What the hell was his name? He was a friend of George Robbins, honey. And he used to have a trailer out there.
I don't remember.
Big, tall guy, but he was stout.
Do you live in Dixon?
No, I live in Carmichael.
Carmichael?
Yeah.
She's got a grandson, Michael.
Oh, really?
Michael.
He's in Japan,
Is he?
teaching English.
Oh.
But he wants to come home.
How long has he been over there?
About
Quite a while.
3 or 4 years, hasn't he?
Uh-huh. What does he want to be in Japan for?
Well,
Yeah.
they've had that bad depression over there.
I have. Well, let me thank you for the interview.
Well, you're welcome.
Can I maybe get a quick shot of
Would you like a
together?
cup of coffee?
Oh,
Oh
no.
gosh, I'm not cleaned up. You don't want to.
Come over here. Come over
Come
here.
over here.
Oh, honey,
So we can have
I
both of
didn't
you.
even look at my hair.
Just a
Your hair is white. It's good.
quick.
You want me to sit on your lap?
Sure. You want to sit in your chair? You want me to get over there closer?
Oh,
You
I'll get over
can't
there.
take a
Well,
picture.
you want me to
You've
get
been
over
in the
here?
interview, so I need to have.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure.
Okay.
Can you see me?
Oh yeah.
I can just see a little red light, that's all.
That you know it's ticking now.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for the interview. I appreciate it. Okay.